we're down. We don't have Jarrett. He's off doing top secret things, which when he gets back, we'll see if we can talk about. Did he say we could talk about any of his stuff? Probably not. Not yet.
Maybe not.
We'll just say this.
I'm sure he can, but maybe we'll
Yeah,
wait
we'll
for
let
him to
him
do it.
come back and tell stories and let him contextualize that. But suffice it to say, he's talking to some crypto people, and that's why he's not with us today. But what's going on in crypto, man? Google, Coinbase? Did you look at any of that after Jarrett mentioned it?
I looked at it when he originally mentioned it. I think maybe last week when he posted
Yeah.
about it. Yeah,
What was your takeaways? Did you have any takeaways?
it sounded pretty cool. I mean, Google is offering these not like crypto services, but at least that they're letting people pay for AWS with crypto. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, why would you want to pay for it with crypto? But I'm guessing that the thought process behind it is that there's so many people with all this wealth that's wrapped up in cryptocurrency,
Yes.
and these people are wanting to start new companies,
Yes.
and it's probably more enticing for them to just sort of be like, hey, let me just take my crypto and spend it outright rather than having to go through all of the trouble of transferring it into fiat and then figuring out the bank account and credit card and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
If Google can just take my crypto, that'll put me in a much better position. And it
Yeah.
could be like from Google's perspective, that they've been lagging behind AWS for a really long time.
Yeah.
And this might just be like, part of the strategy for them to either catch up to AWS or maybe even get ahead of them,
Yeah.
especially when it relates to crypto services. If they think that
Yeah.
Web3 is going to be their part of their operations, that's going to increase in the next couple of years and decades, and that this might be their way of capturing a sizable chunk of that market.
I 100% believe that. So I've got the article from Coinbase up, and they said there's 4 parts to this partnership. Number one, exactly what you're saying, Google Cloud, and this makes sense what you're saying about AWS, and I think you know it, but for those watching, I don't know if they know it. Maybe they do. I hope they do. Most all blockchain functions are happening on GitHub and AWS in tandem. I mean, it's the cloud, it's the cloud processing unit. That doesn't mean there's none going on at Google Cloud, but it's minimal. AWS has the reputation for firing up these services. And I think if you even look at the AWS services, there's like a one-click blockchain setup function, which is nuts. And I should actually look closer at that. But I think you're right. I think Google Cloud has accepted that we're behind on blockchain managed services. And so Coinbase is the obvious place. So step one, they're going to be able to pay. And I think you said it really good. I actually want to zone in on that real quick because I actually think what you're talking about, this wealth that was tied up in crypto by like nouveau riche people, they suddenly had all this crypto money and they knew that the tax implications would get trippy. I think that's mostly what drove the Bored Apes phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because they were promised the sun, the moon, and stars, sexy yacht parties, Airbnb parties, exclusivity, and they didn't have to get rid of their crypto. They just had to hold this thing. So they exchanged huge chunks of this new money into an NFT, and it was a form of liquidity, so to speak. And so I think you're right. I think that there's still that wealth out there, and why not just boot up? If I'm going to boot up even maybe a blockchain project or a Web3 project, I could pay for it with Google Cloud, which has, a solid reputation. So
Mhm.
I think that's a good call out. I wouldn't have called that out. I wasn't thinking about that when I came to this call. The other thing is that they're going to be hosting Coinbase's cloud node service. And I don't even know what this is yet. Coinbase has a cloud node service, but they're
Oh,
going to be running that on Google Cloud, which is an interest. So they're pulling one service one way and another service another way. So that's intriguing. The third Um, Coinbase Prime is the institutional crypto service
Yeah.
for custody and reporting, and that's going to be hosted on Google Cloud now. And then number 4, basically what you're saying about the AWS, Coinbase selected Google Cloud. So like Google Cloud's using them to remit payments. They're using Google Cloud to actually create a bunch of additional services. But I'll tell you what I was thinking. And I pulled up a bunch of things on this, and tell me what you think about this.
Mhm.
I think Google is testing the waters for whether or not it wants to buy Coinbase.
Yeah, I think you said that last week. I was thinking
Did I
about
say that
it.
last week?
Yeah. Or somebody said that last week. It's not the first time I've heard it. Maybe you said it. That was something that I didn't think about, that Google would be interested in buying Coinbase. I mean, I guess they could, right? They could just outright buy Coinbase if they wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
But would that be a thing? Outside of Google Pay, I can't think, or Android Pay or whatever it's called. I can't think of Google being involved in any other financial companies.
That's interesting. So yeah, so we're talking about Google Cloud, which is its own entity, and you're talking about Google Pay, which is a valid, totally valid call out. Like why Google Pay might want to buy Coinbase, but so this led me down this rabbit hole because I asked myself, what are other indications that Google might want to be purchasing? And that is Google purchasing Coinbase stock in this partnership or being gifted, and they have to report it. So I looked up top 10 stockholders of Coinbase, and they weren't in there. But then I started looking up Google holding companies for investments because I'm like, well, maybe it's like a weird holding company that they're trying to keep a little blurred lines. And so I looked up Google Ventures as one. Here's one
Mhm.
you might have known about because you're such a researcher. But I just now found out Gradient Ventures is the
Mm.
name separate from Google Ventures. They're two separate entities. Gradient Ventures specializes in venture capital and early stage projects for AI, specifically Google AI.
Hmm.
Google Ventures does a lot of like consumer products. So I looked under Google Ventures, and from everything I saw, they don't own any Coinbase stock. And so I thought, well, maybe not. And so you're right. I mean, like maybe Google Pay, but what else would they want? The only other thing I was thinking is Google is famous for experimenting.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't they experiment with this relationship to see if they could acquire it? Because maybe there's an enterprise consumer base just for the Google Cloud services. Why not just buy Coinbase? I was looking up Coinbase's revenue. They're still $1 billion company. If you look up like Coinbase price today, which I looked up, they're down year over year. What are they down? They're down year over year net profit margin. They're down 288% over last year.
Jeez. Okay.
But the isn't that nuts? But the revenue is still, hold on, their revenue is still $800 million. And a lot of that is enterprise revenue for Coinbase Prime and its other remittance services.
Yeah, because they just signed with, was it BlackRock that they signed with a couple
Yes,
weeks ago, a couple of months ago?
Coinbase.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. And BlackRock owns a huge chunk of Coinbase already. So
Hmm.
does Vanguard. And so I thought, so you're right. Like, where's the play if Google were to buy Coinbase? Where's the play?
Yeah.
And what have you ever looked at Coinbase Ventures?
No, I haven't.
So I know of several crypto investors who their only strategy is to monitor ventures.coinbase.com. I think it's ventures.coinbase.com. And you can see what Coinbase is investing in.
Hmm.
And if it matures, the first place it matures is it gets added to the Coinbase listing, right? Like, oh, this crypto just added. Well, a lot of times it's promoted out of Coinbase Ventures for whatever
Okay.
reason. So my next thought was I wonder if Google would make a play to just to purchase the venture projects and the enterprise projects And year over year, it's on discount. Coinbase is technically on a net. As of June, its profit margin, get this, was negative 136%.
Oh, in June. Okay. I mean, that makes sense, right? They laid off like 20% of their workforce around the same time, a couple
Yeah.
months after that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it says their revenue was 800 million as of June. Their their net income was negative 1 billion, 1.1 billion. And its
Hmm.
net profit margin was negative. But get this, it beat earnings predictions by 29%. So they thought it was going to be lower. They did all the layoffs, and the layoffs probably helped them recoup this for the earnings. So I don't know if Google cares about much of that. If Google buys it, it's usually for some speculative future thing. But I think this is Google's experiment of, is there a market? And why don't we just partner with the biggest there is, Coinbase, as a
Yeah.
billion-dollar company?
Yeah. And then when just now when you talked about like Coinbase's valuation and stuff, that made me think like, like if Google wants to buy this outright, they have to go there's like a lot more hoops to go through to buy a public company, right, than it is to buy
You're
a
right.
private company.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
the thing that Google might be trying to do is, I mean, a lot of this is just sort of like competition at the very high level.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, or maybe it was late last year, Apple bought a one of those online banking companies. I forget the name of it. It's in the UK. And that was like a huge, like secretive purchase for them. Like nobody could figure out like why in the world is Apple buying a bank.
Okay.
And it seemed like after a while you started like getting some better descriptions out of it. It seemed like the idea for Apple was to sort of circumvent a bunch of stuff that they were being forced to do with the App Store.
Oh,
And so what was happening is with the App Store, Apple would require you to pay 30% for all of the
yes.
revenue that you made. And app developers were saying, hey, we don't want to use Apple's payment system because that's basically how they've been able to get that 30% work is that you end up using their payment system. They're like, we don't
Yeah.
want to use Apple's payment system. We want to either build our own payment system or use some other third-party payment system. And it seems like
Interesting.
what Apple is trying to do with that purchase of the online bank is they're going to now build out components of a payment system and then force the developers to use those components. So if you want to build your own payment system, no problem. You just got to build it based on the stuff that we have available to you. And so
Wow.
now we're not charging you like the 30% upfront anymore. Now we're charging you on the back end for using all of these little components that you're going to put together in order to make your own payment system. And so maybe it's more than 30%, maybe it's less, but the at least they sort of like circumvent that whole conversation. It could be Google trying to do something similar, but maybe looking towards the future and saying, hey, you know what? We're not as concerned with fiat. Maybe we can
Yeah.
make this work with crypto.
Yeah. Tristan says, credit kudos. I hope I'm saying, maybe it's Tristan, sorry, or Tristan. Credit kudos was the fintech company Big Brain buy. I'll have to look into credit kudos
Yeah,
because
that is it.
if what you're saying is right, I don't know how Coinbase though with Google Pay they are, especially in the Play Store, the Android Play Store, the Google Play Store, they could already force these same rules that Apple's forcing, but they haven't yet. And maybe they are looking to the future with the Coinbase purchase because maybe they're just forcing. Maybe there's
Hey,
Ken.
Ken. What's up, Ken?
Hey, Ken, man. Yeah, good morning, Ken. I don't know what part of the country you're in that it's
Hey,
good
he
morning
was
to you. What
Ken
do you?
was just in Abu Dhabi, I think. No, in Dubai, I think. He was in Dubai recently.
Oh yeah, are you in the Middle East over there somewhere? Let us know. So maybe Coinbase, maybe what they're seeing is this. You said the fiat thing. Maybe they're not worried about fiat. Maybe what you're saying, maybe what we're seeing is these check boxes, the four major points of why Coinbase made this deal is maybe the enterprise thing is legit. That's what we're talking about. But maybe as we're watching the dollar get squirrely, but as we're watching the ISO 20022 and the CBDC really look like it's coming online soon. And
Mhm.
that having several implications, maybe they're just looking at going, hey, if people are coming to us with other currencies, oh, he's back in Nova Scotia. Well, maybe he took a nap. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe he was dealing with jet lag. It was amazing in Dubai. We want to hear about this. And you were in there for your crypto projects, if I'm not mistaken. So we want to hear more about that, Ken. Tell us or give us some background on that at some point. But maybe you're right, Jay. Maybe they're just prepping to make their transaction fees on a wider variety of crypto. Maybe it's worth the gambit. Like whatever they pay for this partnership, or it probably doesn't cost them anything, actually. Think about
Mhm.
this. It probably doesn't cost them nearly a dime to fire up other Google Cloud instances, make crypto purchases available, and then you're just getting transaction fees. So maybe it's just widening the means by which, hey, you want to transact with us in puka shells, you want to transact with us in salt, and we just still get a cut. Maybe that's all it is, and they've dollar cost averaged, or they've calculated the cost benefit, and why not just take crypto? you know
Yeah. Because I mean,
that's
if it's that easy to just sort of like, especially if you're using Google Cloud Services to spin up your own coin or your own token,
yes.
it just sort of makes sense, right? To be able to pay in that token as well.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet because I'm pretty confident that AWS, there's like single click smart contract enabled functions in
Hmm.
AWS.
Yeah.
I know that Google Cloud is thinking this, like, how hard can it be for us to go single click develop your own coin, and they don't have to market it? Coinbase is going to market it.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned Coinbase Ventures. They'll probably have enterprise solutions for their own ventures group that will be like, hey, I've got a Web3 concept. Here's my slide deck. Give me like a 6 month to 18-month runway. And they're like, oh, by the way, we're throwing in this Google Cloud one click enterprise blockchain. Boop. And it generates a UX UI for you to just input your details on your tokenization. Boop. There's your token. And we're Coinbase, so we can hype it. So they've got both ends. They got supply and demand. They got consumer retail traders wanting the inside alpha on this stuff. And now they've got the tech side. That's actually, now that we're talking about it,
Yeah.
that's a marketing win across the board for these guys.
Yeah. It seems very similar to what you saw Salesforce doing. Remember, Salesforce launched their NFT platform a
Yeah.
couple months ago, and
How did that go though? I never heard anything after the launch.
I feel like it's still in beta.
Oh,
Like it didn't
okay.
like launch. Like they just sort of let everybody know that hey, we're getting ready to do this thing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
to capitalize on some of the excitement that was happening around NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
But I get that that's the place where they're positioning themselves as well. That it's not so much like an everyday consumer type of thing. It's for enterprise businesses who have a need for NFTs, and whether that's on the marketing side or on something to do with like the customer experience side. But if you have a need for NFTs, Salesforce provides this platform where it's similar to what you were saying, where it's basically like one button click, and I can spin up an NFT and I can send it off to different people's wallets, and I can keep track of all of that stuff in a seamless CRM. So that might be something similar to what Google is thinking about.
I have a coffee every Tuesday morning with a friend he's been an investor in several projects of mine. He's mostly into real estate, but now and again he gets into other speculation. And he asked me this morning. He said, "What's the investment? What's the picks and axes of Web3 next?" And my response was mostly content driven. Like, I don't know how you think about this, but like this is the third major crypto winter. And in
Hmm.
these cycles, this is what I would call the institutional winter, because I think you pointed out Z-Byte, boom. We got those connectors, APIs you're talking about. We're here now going on testnet.
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
Ken,
Okay.
it's time to hop on a call and get an update on Z-Byte's projects, man. I want to hear about that. We do need to follow up, and you even gave me some superior insight on how we could even partner. So let's talk about that. Um, but this is the third major crypto winter.
Hmm.
I think you or Jarrett sent me this list of even in the last 30 days, the institutional rollouts have been crazy. The partnerships that have been coming out, Starbucks, and last night or the night before, MasterCard is like, or was it MasterCard? One of these companies was rolling out their next crypto. I think it was MasterCard, some major facilitation. And so these announcements are coming out nearly daily in the middle of crypto winter. So most of the underground is hurting, but the institutions are like, this is our move. They're making their move. And I said, so unless you're like deep tech into crypto, a deep developer, like Ken, you have a deep knowledge of what's going on, or like George Williams, George Williams with Li-Fi. Is it George?
Roger.
Roger. I'm so sorry. Roger Williams with Li-Fi. They've got some real legitimate technological solutions, but people like us, we're content people. And there's a place for us. But I think that I was like, well, onboarding and coaching and training. But now that we're talking about this and you're mentioning Salesforce, like, for example, I launched a spatial. Have you seen spatial metaverse spaces?
I've been inside of one or two of them, yeah.
So I was setting mine up. Ken, MasterCard. Yes, it was MasterCard. Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for paying attention. MasterCard news, MasterCard to bring crypto trading capabilities to banks. Now, banks.
Tristan says the same thing. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Tristian or Tristan? My bad,
Or
buddy.
Tristan. I don't know. I apologize, sir. But yeah, I appreciate you guys validating this or verifying this. Like, banks could have found these solutions themselves, but what's the ultimate third party that sits in a bank? You know, when you think about medical sales reps, they bring like Dunkin' Donuts. I picture the MasterCard rep showing up at banks and they're like the number one third party. So MasterCard comes along and says, I'm in all these banks, guys. You trust us. Let us bring you crypto. And the bank's like, fine, you handle it. I can imagine that. So my point, though, is money is the next major architecture that institutions bring. And when you're talking about Salesforce, anyone can spin up an NFT, but who can connect it to my banking profile? MasterCard. They can validate all these bankings. And so here comes Google Cloud going, well, Coinbase. I mean, let's just connect it feels like the architecture connecting all these is not DeFi, TradFi. So that leads to a question. Should we call this DeFi anymore? I mean, isn't like most of crypto financial solutions now just TradFi? I mean, there's still DeFi, degen stuff. Did
Yeah.
you ever get into degen trading?
A little bit. I was in like around like some degen communities, but I couldn't stick it out, man. It was just too much. It was
You
too
got to
much
keep up
to
with a lot. You got to convert here and put it into a liquidity pool there, then hold your breath, count to 10, and over here get 115% return. And then the curve finance wars were like exhausting. And
Mhm.
so I'm with you. I did some degen, but my point is like you pulled out, right? And even I, who consider myself at the time a degen, I got exhausted. What do we want? We just want to predictable financing, right? I was looking at. Have you done any staking?
Yeah. In fact, I've got some stuff staked that I can't get out because, well, at least when I tried, because gas prices were too high, I was like, it's not worth it.
Can I ask what rate of return you're getting on your staking?
Uh, uh, I don't remember. I don't
So
think it was that much. Maybe like
no.
5%, 3% or something.
So I challenged my Discord. I said, "Hey, Discord, I've got like 500 people, and like 490 of them are quiet, right?" And I asked them all. I said, "Hey, now that we're in this crypto winter, can anyone verify for me if they're making double-digit staking returns anywhere?" And it was crickets. Like, we used to be able to get 100% return, and not on these DAOs, like just in normal staking. And you can't find any of that. So I watched as our desire for security and predictable financial practices and banking practices go up, our tolerance for lower returns or for returns goes down. And
Mhm.
so most Ethereum returns I'm seeing are between 3 and 5%.
Yeah.
My Cardano is like 4%. But I think we're okay with this for predictability and liquidity. And so I think I think when you said that about Salesforce, it's making me think that they're building these tools, predicting the future that people like Google, people like MasterCard, and financial institutions are going to one day turn on maybe ISO 20022. And once that's on, that's like connecting the railways to the East Coast and West Coast, and everything's connected now. And then I mentioned spatial for this reason. Like, I set up my spatial and I thought, well, maybe I can actually start taking like coaching appointments in this space. And I was like, well, that'll be an interesting experiment, but what's the functionality? And then I asked myself, well, what functionality do I want? I could coach like this or in person. Why would I do spatial? Well, my avatar. Well, Ready Player Me. Do you have an avatar in Ready Player Me?
No, I don't. I tried and it didn't work.
What do you mean it didn't?
Like it wouldn't. I don't know if it's like a darker skin thing, but it wouldn't recognize my image. It didn't.
Oh, you uploaded a photo. You didn't
Yeah,
just
yeah.
do the manual update?
No, I didn't. No.
Dude, I'm going to create your avatar because you got this wicked distinct beard that would definitely stand out. But I made one and I thought this is great. And what makes it great is that I click integrate and it just pipes my Ready Player Me avatar into spatial.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I want my avatar like that anywhere there's a Decentraland. I don't care if it's like a pixelated version. I want my avatar everywhere. And the same with my finances. I want my net worth that is in my portfolio to be accessible in any corner of the cryptoverse. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what this is pointing to, that these companies are positioning themselves for a major financial event. Maybe it's CBDCs. What's the date on that? Is it whether there's anyone viewing or you? Do you know if there even a rough date on the U.S. CBDC?
I gotta imagine it's gonna be years out, right? I mean,
You think?
they've been testing it for at least 5 years now. At this point, I was working with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank when they was
What?
setting up theirs, and when we were doing that project, the European Central Bank and the US Fed and the Canadian Central Bank, they had all already been doing experiments. Like the Fed had done like
Really?
dozens of experiments, and this was like in 2017.
Now, so we talk a lot about the U.S. CBDC, and I never knew that you worked for the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. So, how far along is Canada's? Is that
Uh,
still years and years out?
I haven't heard them say anything about it at all. In fact, in Canada, it sort of feels like we're going in the opposite direction because they've been like cracking down on how much crypto you can buy, and there's this whole like Emergencies Act thing where they basically have the power now to reach into your account and take out money. Um, and Actually, when they signed the Emergencies Act, most of the crypto, like the crypto millionaires, the crypto billionaires in Canada left.
Really?
Yeah, they
Where
left.
where what where did most of them? What was kind of the rumor on where that money was fleeing to?
Seemed like it was to the Caribbean.
To the Caribbean?
Or if you didn't already have like a second passport, and probably people already did, like you went to Europe or wherever your other location was.
Yeah,
Moving to the Caribbean is what I heard a lot of people saying, just because it was so fast. Like
yeah,
you put down $250,000 and you've got a passport by the end of the month, type of thing.
yeah. Now, with your experience with, I didn't realize you worked for a central bank of any kind, let alone the Eastern Caribbean one.
Mhm.
As you were working there, did you feel like they were keeping up with the technology or staying ahead even?
I think this was their opportunity to try to pull that off. I mean, their whole reasoning behind wanting to move into CBDCs was commercial banks or retail banks or just regular banks were making it too expensive for average people to have bank accounts just because of the fees. Like if you worked on for minimum wage and you're making like $1,000 a month, and then 10 or 20 of those dollars go towards fees, and then like maybe you lose $50 every month in overdraft or something like that. Like that really matters, right? That's like
Mm,
7% of your income. So,
yeah.
and that's really what they were trying to address by creating CBDC is how do we eliminate the banking system from people who just want a place to keep their money?
And your sense of it is this was the conversation within the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank
Mhm.
or the public experimenting with crypto?
No, in the bank. This was in the bank because what
That's
was end up
nuts.
happening is, yeah, because it affected them, right? Because what it ends up happening is if the general public can't afford a bank account,
Yeah.
that means they get their paycheck, they turn it into cash, and they just keep their cash at home. They're now outside of the influence of the central bank, and the central bank wants to be influential in the region. It has to make sure that it touches all of the people, or as many
It
people
needs
as it can.
velocity, it needs lending to be happening, it needs
Mhm.
all of that to be functioning. You're right. And a lot of Caribbean, I don't know about the more developed Caribbean nations, but the underdeveloped Caribbean nations I was a part of, you're right. Any currency they would get a hold of is literally dug in a hole in a corner of the house. I
Mhm.
mean, it's outside of the system. They're petrified from losing that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And, like, what was your role? Can I ask what your role was in the bank?
For that project, I was an advisor, just an advisor.
Bro, like, how do we parlay that into consulting central banks? That's nuts, man. You can well, and that gets to a good point. And I mentioned this to you or Jarrett. I don't remember anymore. We have so many of these conversations. I do believe so. To my investor friend's question, what are the picks and axes? My one answer to him was content, but then I said something that I said to Jarrett for sure, and maybe you too, to position yourself as a thought leader. I hate this term, but as someone who understands the dynamics, and maybe as a
Mhm.
content creator, maybe as a podcaster, but really what you're doing is building a case for 18 months down the road when these people want advisors. And they're going to be paying serious money for consultants because right now, as we see with MasterCard and Google Cloud and Salesforce, they're building these tech stacks. Salesforce better than anyone because it's into marketing and sales. But these other institutions, they're going to be talking, how do I engage with the public with this? They're going to be looking for people like you and Jarrett and myself who have kind of got our fingers on the pulse of the zeitgeist of like how these people talk. If an institution uses FRENS friends in their Twitter feed, like they
Mhm.
don't know it's like late to the party and it's really tacky for institutions to be using this stuff. It's
Yeah.
like what are the kids saying? I think that to this point of this role you've had and that we're continuing to have, I really think the future for content creators in the Web3 space is to position yourselves to be ready to be consultants and advisors in the next 2 years, because I think they're really going to be doling out money for how do we now engage with the market. We've got these 6 stellar tools that have been proven at the enterprise level. How do we
Yeah.
get this at the retail level? Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And that's interesting. For you to go to central banking advisement, what category of advisement were you doing?
It was on the tech side mostly. I think a lot of what they were trying to do is sort of like figure out like what's the rest of the world doing that we're not,
Mm,
and then how do we capitalize on that? They already had the idea like, okay, the thing that we probably need to do is crypto related,
mm,
but then how do we, we're not just going to spin up a coin. Like how do we tie that whole thing into our ecosystem in the best possible way, so that
mm.
it makes sense for us and all people.
When did you leave that role?
Um, let's say sometime between 2018 and 2019, sometime like in there.
That early they were talking about this. And when you left them, where did the conversation, to your knowledge, get left off? Like, were they like, this sucks, we're not going to do this? Or were they like, let's go deep,
Oh, they,
Like,
they went all the way through. I mean, they have their CBDC already.
do they?
Yeah, I forget what they call it. I forget what they call it because it's not like it wasn't super popular. And I think that is what a lot of governments are going to run into because
Yes.
it's like, the way that you get somebody to use a currency is essentially like you either pay them to do it, like you were seeing done with Bitcoin, like there were all of these Bitcoin faucets, you
Yeah.
know, like I still talk to people who tell me like, yeah, I've got, hundreds of Bitcoins just because I got them for free through these faucets initially. So you either pay them to do it or you force them to do it. No, most countries don't have, well, most central banks don't have the wherewithal to force their people to use a particular currency, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why you see like in South America where like Jarrett talks about the Colombian peso all the time. Its value going lower and lower, and all people are doing is just moving on to another currency. Like there's no way for you to force them to use it, right? Oh, so Tristan says the sand dollar was the Bahamian one.
Oh,
So
that's right. I remember this one. How is the
yeah,
sand dollar doing?
I'm not sure. So there are at least three different CBDCs in the Caribbean that I know of. Jamaica had one, the Eastern Caribbean had one, and the Bahamas had one. Um, So, oh yeah, so like I was saying, so you could either force people to do it, and that's kind of tough. Like maybe the US can pull that off, maybe the EU can pull that off, but maybe tougher for, and China, of course, can pull that off, maybe tougher for other countries to do it. The other way that you do it is you pay people to do it, and that's what Jamaica was trying to do. When they launched their CBDC, I think they put like $10 million into like, hey, if you're in the first, I don't know, 1,000 people to buy this, whatever, you get like some kind of cash prize or something like that. Just basically trying to entice people to get into it. Um, I don't think it
D
worked out, because people are just going to be skeptical about this whole thing, right?
Well, and this is the thing. I've got the website up for the sand dollar,
Hmm.
sanddollar.bs, and I think that .bs is the
Bahama.
Bahamian
Hmm.
the Bahamas extension. I'm
Yeah.
looking at the homepage on the website, and like half the website is off. Like you can't read it; it's off the screen. And it's like, and it's like, hi, trust us with your money. Here, let me see if I can just share this with you real quick. Here, I got this right here. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Like
that
this is the
sucks.
edge. This this is the edge of the screen right here, and it's like, wait, I'm gonna trust you with my money, and you can't even get the page shifted. Like the news is off. I can't even read what's going on. What is what is going on? And I don't want to be overly critical, but I think what this gets to is something that we've talked about last Saturday. I really think the next major push is a marketing push for like how do we market crypto? Um, One question again with where Jarrett's at, he's talking to some people, and I'll let him tell the story. But he told me one room he was going to be in today, and I said to him, "Hey, well, as you talk to these people, I'm super curious on how they're marketing." He said, "Marketing their X, Y, and Z," and I said, "No, just marketing crypto in general, because it still seems like it's so bad." Aside
Hmm.
from Matt Damon with crypto.com, which that didn't go, it went off good at first, like it was a Super Bowl ad, wasn't it?
I don't remember that. What did Matt Damon do for Crypto.com?
He was just in the commercial. He was Matt Damon. I mean, he was. They just did a crypto.com retail trading, and he cut away, and it was inspirational and this, that, or the other. And I think at first it was well received by crypto fans, but
Hmm.
then I think the crypto dollar went flatter. There was some hack in crypto.com. Something goofy happened, and then everyone started, of course, memeing out how in poor taste this was. And it's
Okay.
like, man, right now, crypto marketing, you can't win for losing. But I really do think that we're looking at the Bahamian dollar here. I really do think that looking like we have our act together, because we have to market to two types of people. We have to market to institutions. Hey, this project I'm doing or this direction I'm going is as legit as any other business. But we're also marketing to people to adopt it. And there's so many signals like this that I think are pretty sad. But what you're talking about, I wish more people knew while you were there. you said they went deep and they were going all the way with their experimentation, which means they're really trying to get the legitimacy, the security of this thing correct. So, have you used any of the Eastern Caribbean dollars or currencies?
No, I didn't, and I can tell you why too. It was like it was the KYC and the onboarding. It was like
Mm,
to to be able to use it, you had to what did you had to like upload like photos of your passport or your
hmm.
driver's license or something that identified that you were from the Caribbean.
Oh,
And
wow.
like if you're outside of the Caribbean and you don't necessarily have that type of stuff, like it was pretty tough to get
And that's
going.
weird because right now, if you live in China, you can have American dollars.
Hmm.
But if you lived in China when it comes to CBDCs and you had to do this insane KYC process, it there is you would think that something that was made for mobility and ease of use would have lower barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Tristan makes a great point. So far, marketing has to be based on utility of it or have a token with a physical backing of some sort. You're absolutely right. And the utility, I think, our bullshit meter. And Jay, I'd raise this question to you, but I think most people in the crypto space, our bullshit meter is dialed in, and we can
Hmm.
tell when there's speculative bullshit utility. And when it comes to tokenization, like what was the last token that actually had backing? So I'll hand this to you, Jay. Like, what's util? Like, what? He's totally right here. But like, what projects have solid utility that have succeeded at marketing any of this stuff?
Hmm. I don't know. What's up, Victor? Um, what projects have really solid utility that have succeeded at marketing?
And if you can't think of any, that's a problem.
I'm thinking of one in my head, but I'm thinking like it's not a token. It's not like it's an asset backed NFT, and I don't think that's
Okay,
what you
well,
mean.
not financial advice to the public, but what is it?
And now I'm struggling to remember the name of
Oh,
it.
no worries.
It's an asset backed NFT that allowed for you to buy fine alcohol and spirits.
There was another one with watches. Didn't we talk about one where there was an NFT around watches? But
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was pretty early on. Oh, was it physical watches? I remember the
I mean, the
digital.
NFT was fake, but I think it gave you access. Maybe if you had like a collection of the NFTs, you actually had access to a physical watch, which I don't know how it happens. Because
Hmm.
if someone else collected those NFTs, you're going to take your watch off and ship it and give it to them. The
Hmm.
one that I got involved with that I was very hopeful for, Tristan, was I believe it was it was a soccer team. It was the Lions, and I have the NFT still, and they were doing fundraising for a soccer club. They had actually gotten so far as gotten initial contracts and initial interest, but then in the downturn, obviously they couldn't keep the funding going because the idea was that people would trade the NFT and that the royalties would fund and sustain the budget of the soccer team, and then eventually it got off the ground, and then its own veracity as a soccer team would carry it. But we never even got to having a team that could play, and they tried. And so I think utility I think is I think we're realizing utility is a tougher argument to make than we thought it was at first.
Yeah,
And then tokens with physical backings. Did you have the one that looks like you found? Did you find
yeah.
it?
It's called Block Bar. Block
A
Bar.
lock bar. Was it like gold?
No, it was all liquor. It's like wine and spirits.
Oh,
So
liquor.
if you wanted to buy like some high end bottle of wine, thousands of dollars, you can buy it like on the secondary market, or you can buy it directly from the manufacturer. And this company had deals and partnerships with all of these high end manufacturers that you can buy this stuff directly from them right as soon
Mm.
as they made it.
So Tristan says, stay tuned for the next rollout of a physically backed token. Tristan, are you giving us alpha or are you just saying in principle in general? If you're giving us alpha, give us the real alpha, brother. Or if you're just
Well,
saying in general, yes, watch, yes, in general, the next physically backed token, which will be tough because now part of the reason I think this is tough, and what do you think about this, Jay? Part of the reason I think physically backed tokens have become tougher is that the SEC, at least in the United States, has gotten really intense about going after companies are if you're doing this physically backed token for a fundraise, if it's attached to ownership, you have to be treated under SEC laws. And I think a lot of projects hit the brakes in America anyway, that okay, we're not messing with this. What do you
yeah.
think about that?
No, I think you're right. I mean, you see that happening with Yuga Labs, right? I mean, those guys at
Yeah.
Yuga Labs, I bet they thought they were really smart. They thought they were really smart 6 months ago when they launched that coin, but it's backfired tremendously.
Oh man, well, and they have to integrate it. Like they've been struggling to integrate it into other side, right? Like they have got to launch this game and then use ApeCoin for the game so that people were purchasing Cane tokens and not fundraising, right? Like they've got to
Mhm.
pivot that and deliver. There's probably a small window for that. Now, so yeah, Tristan, give us the alpha if you're giving it, and then
Victor says Rug Radio, and this is a good example. I recently found out about Rug Radio. I think they're pretty cool. It's just like it says. It's basically like a radio station.
okay.
And they've got lots of different live broadcasts. It's almost like a DAO where you buy a token to get in, and then as a member, you get a whole bunch of different benefits. But I know some
So
people
it's an
who are
NFT.
involved.
It's NFT
Yeah,
driven or token driven.
it's NFT driven, but I think there's also a token.
Okay.
I know some people who are involved, and they really enjoy it. Like whenever they have events, they all go out to check it out.
Okay, so there's a Rug Radio Genesis NFT. So that would be check how to claim. That would be interesting to check that out. And then there's a token. So do you have Jay, do you have any tokens or any NFTs to Rug Radio?
No, I don't. I don't. I know some people who do have them.
Victor, tell us if you're a member or if you just know people who are members and you farm, here we go. And you farm the rug token just having the NFT in the wallet. Now that like a lot of
Oh,
projects are doing that, staking and or farming.
yeah.
Nearly every NFT, any Solana NFT I have has farming. Any ADA NFT I have has farming right now. So then what is the token used for? That would be very interesting. And it's just a social club for Web3? Is that our impression? Like
That's the impression I get of it.
like a Twitter Spaces deal?
Yeah, it's all about like Web3 content.
Dang, I'm looking at their schedule.
Yeah.
They have a huge amount of events. Can I show this real quick? Again, this is not a plug. I do not own any Rug Radio. Jay does not own any Rug Radio. But Jay, look at this schedule. Wednesday,
Hmm.
12 p.m., Wednesday, 3 p.m., Wednesday at 12 p.m. I mean, there is a lot here. And it looks like they each have their own host. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's worth looking into. And then Victor says, "Hey, check this out." So this is probably the account for Rug Radio, which I'll check out after the show. I really appreciate you dropping that, Victor, because I am looking for more intelligent. I mean, I love the Not Crypto Bros, but I feel like, oh, he says that's his
Yeah, yeah,
Victor.
yeah.
Victor's repping his own
I, I
his
checked that
cat
out
girl
right
token.
away. Yeah.
His
This one
cat
is
girl
Victor's.
token. um, yeah, it would be really interesting to get involved into more intelligent groups. I also wonder how the Hug. Remember, did we talk about the Hug, Mark Zuckerberg's sister, and how she had what looked like a good NFT community that had IRL components, like I think we even talked about in the early days. Um, if you match they had different categories, and if you got a pair for one of them, Zuckerberg's PR firm would PR your project.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Diamond Hands, that's mine. Diamond Hands for life. Victor Diamond. Victor's funny. For those who don't know, Victor's very selective about what he has diamond hands for. And Victor, do let us know what you're hyping today. Not financial advice, but the last project he showed me, I missed out, and it moved like 200% that day. That's too funny. So where is this headed then? I mean, we got Google doing Coinbase, we got Mastercard doing remittances. The financial system is going. What institutional moves do you predict we're going to see? Not necessarily specifics, but institutionally at large. What direction do you think this is headed, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're all pointing, everything is pointing towards a situation where money and currency becomes privatized, where we're separating the business of government from the business of money. Governments are obviously going to try to hold on to it, but I think the only real way, it's like we were talking about before, to get somebody to use your currency, either you force them to do it or you pay them to do it. And I don't think governments are going to pay anybody to use their currency, maybe just Jamaica. But the only real way you can force people to use your currency, I think is going to end up being businesses, because businesses can be easily sanctioned, right? Like if you've got a
Interesting.
small company like an ice cream shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota, like you can't like up and leave and go to another country and it's like, screw it, I'm not paying, I'm not messing with the US fiat dollar, like that. As long as the company's open, it's in that place, I don't know, the
Yeah.
IRS can show up or whatever and do what they want. So it's not going to be that difficult for a government to say, hey, every company now needs to use the CBDC. But I
That is
think,
that's interesting.
but yeah, but outside of that, what you're going to end up seeing is a lot of like privatization of the money function, where private
What's the purpose of
companies.
credit cards at that point?
Yeah, I feel like what's the purpose of credit cards? No, like it's the same thing. Yeah, it allows you to get access to credit, maybe, but then I
Oh,
don't.
you're spending money that you don't own.
You're spending
So I
money that you
mean,
don't own. Yeah, but how
so like
how how important is that? Like, I don't know. Like, what percentage of people use the credit function of their credit card as opposed to just using it as a payment and then paying it off before the payment becomes due?
I don't think many people have that discipline, bro. Like seriously, I think
Oh,
people.
really? That's how I use mine exclusively. So other people don't do that?
I honestly, well, I'll say it like this. I honestly think minorities. I mean this. I think minorities are better at that than non-minorities. I mean that. Like, and I know that
Hmm.
sounds weird, but there is this like bourgeois sense of like, I spend it on the credit card and I've got a good job, and I'll get the bonus at the end of the quarter.
Mhm.
And that bonus at the end of the corner accumulates. And I think so many other types of people, I think maybe it's just non-Americans. I don't know, but I think so many other types of people don't have that discipline because they're just petrified of that 22%, But I honestly think most Americans I talk to, they're not on monthly before my balance gets recalculated. I'm going to pay this down. I just don't see that happening. Not most of the people I consult, especially with businesses, because when it comes to business and you put it on a business credit card, you think, well, our next in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to get all these sales and I'll pay this down. No, they're literally paying on next year. Like they'll let it float for a year just to get float because I think businesses are tighter. But I mean, that's just my 2 cents. You have a different view. You sound like you're pretty disciplined. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
and I go ahead, go ahead.
you're right, you're right. It might be like a geographical thing, because like I think about why I use credit cards like that is, and it's just because that's all I know. Like when I got my first credit card, when I got out of undergrad
Yeah,
and I went home, I got a credit card because like if you live on an island, you got to pay for something. You need like MasterCard or Visa, to get
yeah,
your Amazon or whatever.
yeah,
So I got a credit card. I remember I had a job. I worked for the government, which was like the biggest employer in the country, but they still wouldn't give me a credit card. The only way for me to get a credit card was for it to be cash secured.
Yeah,
So I had to,
secured credit card. Yeah.
yeah, I put up like, I don't know, $5,000, and they held that $5,000, and all I had access to was $5,000. And so,
Holy cow.
like, yeah, so every time I paid for something, every time I used the card, I paid it off right away, just so that they didn't take my $5,000. You know what I mean? So that's my entire experience with credit cards. So, like, even now that I have an actual credit limit, I
Yeah.
still use it in the exact same way.
See, and a lot of people like villainize banks, but like the secured credit card is a habit forming device. And yes, their habit is to have you use their credit because they make good money on the interest. But I also think they're trying to train this behavior where your money is you're basically staked, right? Your own money is staked on this credit limit, and you don't want to give that away. So the stakes are higher. So you do develop this habit of, no, I'll just pay this down and get my money back later. Yeah, I absolutely think that should be the habit. I just I don't find many Americans. So maybe it's geographical, maybe it's demographical. I don't know. But I know the people around me. I'll say that way. I know the people around me don't seem like they operate that way, unless I'll tell you the difference. If they're in the real estate game,
Mhm.
there's two schools of thought. In the real estate game, you want to build up credit. So you're playing the credit game. So you use the card and spend it down. But I'm sure you've seen this. If you have, let's say, $10,000 credit, if you don't use any of it, that could penalize you.
Yeah.
So you have to always be using like 20% of it, 20 to 25%, give or take, something like that. Do you know the number exactly?
No, I don't know, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like, either it's funny how you can get penalized either if you don't use enough,
That's right.
or like
That's
it's
right.
or if you use too much. But then it also works, like I've seen people try to, like, you've got a credit card and
Yep.
you put the limit up higher, like you haven't spent anything, but you put an extra $1,000 onto it.
Yes.
That you get penalized for that as well, because
That's
the
right.
credit card company isn't authorized to hold your money.
Yeah. So they're playing this game of like, well, let me try to always keep, out of this hypothetical 10,000 credit limit, let me always keep 2,000 on credit.
Hmm.
But what are you spending for that? And so there's people like us, we don't mind carrying a limit so long as our cash flowing property is paying that minimum payment plus down. Now that's expensive money. You're absolutely right. But in an effort to maintain at least that threshold that keeps a healthy credit limit,
Hmm.
if our cash flow income is paying for that, if we're paying a little bit more, 22% annualized on that money, as long as I'm not paying, if I were paying that from my salary, then I would be really incentivized to get that down. My earned income, not my salary. If I were paying that on my earned income, that would be really painful. But the fact that we're paying that on renter income, or Airbnb income makes it, I guess, a little more palatable, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't know. This would be interesting to get into this with international people like Crescenda in the Philippines. It would be interesting to see how they handle credit, and getting someone from India would be very insightful to see how do they handle credit and what are those credit laws, because we have to know, going back to the original conversation, we have to assume Google and those institutions that are moving into crypto are seeing a variety of things. They're getting a globalized view that any one of us retail people really only have our regional view. And it would be very interesting to get a more globalized view of what game they're playing and where they think it's going. So, well, we're coming to the top of the hour this week, or at least it's Tuesday. Jay, what shout outs do you have?
Oh man, every time we do this, I completely forget to think about shoutouts. This is like catches me off guard every single time. I have no idea. Like, in the Web3 space, I don't know if I've heard about anything
Well, not in
that's
the Web3
happened
space. Who are you shouting out in general?
just in general. Anybody who's
Yeah.
done some cool stuff. Oh, you know
Yeah.
what? My 30-day podcast team, like, we ran into some snags, and it took them a little longer to get their episodes together, but then they're on it. Like, they're like hunting me down, like, Jay,
Interesting.
we haven't met in a week. What are we doing? You know, and I'm like, oh man, cool. That makes me feel really good that they are as interested in starting their podcast as I am as interested in being a podcaster. So shout out to them. Shout out to the 30-day podcast challenge team.
And where can people check that out?
If you're interested, just send me a DM. It's not like anywhere in particular, but you know, we all try to get together and help each other out. So if you're interested, let me know.
Yeah, so for those people watching, if you're interested in content creation, and we are working on a product for people in this, because I believe that content is king. And I think you'd agree with this, Jay, whether we're talking about video or audio. I challenged, because my shout out is to a buddy of mine, Ian. And Ian and I, we've been starting to mastermind once a week on Tuesdays. Tuesdays are my meeting days, right? I got a 6 a.m., I got a 12 p.m., and then I've got the show. And there's just meetings all day. And my guy Ian is starting a coaching brand for young men called Zeus, and it's a really cool thing. He's a super tall 6'4" dude, super built, like he's Mr. Fitness, super inspiring, and his brand is on point. He's got this thick white, gray beard, but he's super strong, and he's a really interesting guy. But we were talking about content, and I said, if you poll the next consumers, kids age 13 to 17, and you ask them, what are the 10 most influential brands you follow? They're going to name people.
Yeah.
You're going to say, I follow Stacy, I follow D. Lee, I follow Alex Hormozy, I follow this list of people, and whoever it is.
Gary V.
Whoever it is, 8 out of 10 of them are going to be people, not
Mm-hmm.
companies. And I said, when was the last time in a conversation you or I said Nike or Coke? They're gone. These are the brands of the future. And so I say all that to say, if you're watching and you thought about putting your message together, check out Podmaster Jay, DM him. He'll get you going on the 30-day podcast. Real quick, my shout out is to Ian, but I did want to call this comment out from Victor. To know the game, go watch the World Economic Forum. Victor, props to you. I think we know we should, but props to you for being the guy that does. I mean, seriously, like I'm really only interested in growing my wealth, so I know just enough to follow to get ahead of the wealth cycles. But good on you. This is a great call out. The World Economic Forum, they are leading where we are going. So is the World Bank, right? The IMF, the International Monetary Fund. These are organizations that are leading us, and we need to pay attention to what they're doing. So thanks to Victor.
Sure.
So folks, what'd you say?
No, I was agreeing with that. Some of it too, like you just really have to pay attention to what's happening in the macro financial space. There's a lot of talk recently around, we talked about this a little bit last time about like companies going into bankruptcy in Germany, people struggling with the recession in the UK. You're seeing all of the spending that's happening coming out of the US. GDPs are falling across the globe. So yeah, I mean, these are the things that you definitely need to be paying attention to if you're a business owner, even if you're not a business owner, just so that you can be prepared for your own spending. See what's happening with inflation. I saw this one thing in the US, like egg prices are up on average 27%.
Oh,
and you might think like, oh, that's just eggs, but like if you think like everything is up like 20%, like yo, I'm spending 20% more on everything than I was last year. And if you didn't save any money last year, it means that this year you're going into debt.
Oh yeah. I go through about 3 dozen eggs a week right now on my fitness plan, right? It's nuts. And I have watched the price of eggs go up. I'm like, what is going on? But when you pay attention to global inflation, and it's one thing to be in global recession, right? That's tough. But I think inflation specifically is causing more concern in the voices I pay attention to, like Ray Dalio. I really follow Ray Dalio. I really respect him as a person and the company he was able to build with Bridgewater. In his book Principles, have you seen the latest book, How to Survive? His principles on surviving global cycles or something like this. I am dying to get into this book, but neither here nor there. It's top of the hour. Thank you for everyone who's joined in. Please like, subscribe, share on LinkedIn, share it with a friend. Let us know what you're thinking about. And no matter what you do, make it a great day, guys. Thanks for stopping by. We appreciate you.
Peace, y'all.